Bismarck. On May 24, 1941, a single surface battle in the North Atlantic became a media event when Bismarck sent HMS Hood to the bottom and then vanished into the stormy sea. Bismarck opens this list not because she was the heaviest, but because she became the most feared battleship in a single week. Built for the Kriegsmarine, Bismarck displaced about 56,300 short tons at full load. That is roughly 51,100 metric tons. She measured 823 feet from bow to stern and carried 8 15-inch main guns and 4 twin turrets. Her designers balanced armor and speed with a propulsion plant rated for 150,000 shaft horsepower and a top speed near 30 knots. In service, she hunted convoys and drew the Royal Navy on a manhunt that consumed dozens of ships and aircraft over 3 days. Her surface action on May 24th sank the pride of the Royal Navy and forced Britain to revise convoy escorts worldwide. Her loss 2 days later ended a brief but catastrophic reign, a battleship that made the world watch the ocean. Yamato. Where Bismarck burned in the Atlantic, Yamato was built to dominate the Pacific with size rather than a single dramatic night. Yamato displaced about 81,536 short tons at full load. That is roughly 74,000 metric tons. She stretched 862 feet long and mounted 3 triple turrets of 18.1-inch guns, the largest naval artillery ever fitted to a single hull. Her belt armor reached 80 inches in places, and her power plant could push her to about 27 knots on 150,000 shaft horsepower. Japan built Yamato to overmatch any possible opponent. The idea was a single ship that could trade hits and survive where smaller ships could not. She spent most of her career as a fleet in being and as a strategic reserve, then sailed on a one-way mission in April 1945 where carrier aircraft overwhelmed her air cover. Torpedoes and bombs sank Yamato off Kyushu with massive loss of life. A ship built to outfight every other warship became a sacrificial slug in a new age of air power. Musashi. Musashi is Yamato's twin and a near equal in every dimension. She is one of the heaviest and most heavily armed battleships ever laid down. Musashi displaced roughly 81,000 short tons at full load. That is roughly 73,300 metric tons. Her hull was 863 feet long, and she shared Yamato's 3 triple 18.1-inch turrets and the same monstrous armor scheme. Where Yamato survived long enough to reach her final sortie, Musashi drew a larger test of lethality. In October 1944, she was found by U.S. carrier aircraft and struck by dozens of torpedoes and bombs over a single day. Damaged and listing, she went down with more than 2,000 crew aboard. Musashi's sinking proved that even the thickest steel could not defend a capital ship against coordinated carrier strike tactics and massed air-delivered ordnance. A mountain of steel that showed size no longer guaranteed survival. Iowa. As the Pacific moved toward carrier warfare, the United States responded with a different solution: fights that needed speed and protection for carriers. Iowa-class battleships were the answer, designed for 33-knot fleet operations while still mounting 16-inch guns. USS Iowa displaced about 64,445 short tons at full load. That is roughly 58,400 metric tons. She measured 887 feet in length and carried 9 16-inch 50-caliber Mark 7 guns with a power plant rated above 212,000 shaft horsepower to reach those 33 knots. The Iowas combined long-range firepower with high sustained speed so they could accompany fast carrier task forces and still engage shore targets at extreme ranges. They served from World War II into Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, firing on targets in 1943, 1951, 1991, and again in the 2000s after modernization. A battleship that could keep up with carriers and still punch through coastal defenses. Missouri. Where Iowa was the template, USS Missouri became the most publicly visible Iowa, the ship on which Japan signed surrender on September 2, 1945. Missouri displaced about 64,000 short tons at full load. That is roughly 58,100 metric tons. She matched the Iowa-class dimensions at 887 feet and shared 9 16-inch guns plus a layered anti-aircraft battery that expanded over her career to include dozens of medium and small caliber mounts. Missouri operated in the Pacific Air-Sea battles of 1945 and returned to active service in the 1980s with Tomahawk cruise missiles and modern fire control, a retrofit that extended her missile range far beyond the original gun armament. Her presence at Tokyo Bay converted naval power into a diplomatic instrument. Her later missile strikes in 1991 showed how battleships could be refitted to deliver precision standoff fire, a ship that wrote the war's final chapter and evolved into a modern strike platform. New Jersey, where Missouri closed one war, USS New Jersey illustrates the battleship's unexpected longevity through modernization and repeated reactivation. New Jersey displaced about 64,300 short tons at full load. That is roughly 58,300 metric tons. She carried the same 9 16-inch guns and a modern electronics and missile suite after her 1980s overhaul, including Tomahawk and Harpoon missile launchers and close-in weapon systems. New Jersey fired from the Mediterranean, the Korean Peninsula, and the Lebanese coast. Her 1983 shore bombardment in Lebanon is one example of a battleship providing precision and persistent fire support. Recommissioned 4 times between 1943 and 1991, New Jersey proved a platform could be adapted for new weapons and a different form of naval diplomacy, a battleship that reinvented its mission 3 times over. Wisconsin. Most battleships end when their hulls rust. Wisconsin instead kept serving wherever heavy naval gunfire or presence was required. Wisconsin displaced about 64,300 short tons at full load. That is roughly 58,300 metric tons. She was 887 feet long, carried 9 16-inch guns, and sustained operations at speeds above 30 knots. In 1991, Wisconsin launched the modernized complement of Tomahawk cruise missiles and provided naval gunfire in both World War II and Desert Storm eras. Her repeated deployments demonstrated that a large, well-protected hull could survive technological churn if given contemporary weapons and sensors. She is an example of continuity between industrial-era naval firepower and late 20th century precision strike. A hull that bridged 2 centuries of naval warfare. Tirpitz. Where Bismarck struck fear in the Atlantic, her sister Tirpitz became a stationary menace that tied down Allied resources for years. Tirpitz displaced roughly 56,200 short tons at full load. That is roughly 51,000 metric tons. She measured about 828 feet and mounted 8 15-inch guns, with armor and machinery similar to Bismarck. Rather than seeking battle, Tirpitz sheltered in Norwegian fjords and threatened Arctic convoys. Her mere presence forced the Allies to maintain heavy maritime and air forces nearby. In November 1944, RAF heavy bombers finally sank her while she lay anchored in Tromsø, after a campaign that had consumed midget submarines, aerial mining operations, and repeated bombing raids. A ship that cost the Allies men, aircraft, and ships long before she ever sailed into open battle. HMS Vanguard. The last battleship ever completed, HMS Vanguard represents the end of an era more than the apex of scale. Vanguard displaced about 49,700 short tons at full load. That is roughly 45,100 metric tons. She was 814 feet long and carried 8 15-inch guns taken from canceled World War I-era mounts, combined with modern radar and fire control of the 1940s. Commissioned in 1946, Vanguard never fought in a wartime fleet action. Instead, she served as a royal and diplomatic flagship, showing the Royal Navy's global reach in the early Cold War. Her design married heavy armor and big guns with improved habitability and more efficient fuel systems, but she arrived after air power had already rewritten naval priorities. A final battleship that closed the book on battleship design. So which battleship shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, please make sure to subscribe. See you in the next video.